So let's now go into a little bit more kind of a framework for people who are watching or listening to the podcast of how they can write, not necessarily speeches, but keynotes, post emails, etc. So the first thing in your book, you're talking about this 50-25-25 rule for writing. Can you talk about this? Get into the details. What does this mean?
Yeah, and so that's a rule that I use, that I recommend to people. I teach speech writing and communications at American University in DC. I teach this and I work with my clients. So it's rooted in, I think, one of the big problems that we have. Whenever we have to give a presentation or a speech or anything at all, we're looking at a blank page, a white page, and it's scary, and the cursor is kind of blinking at us and taunting us. So, it's scary. Oh my God, I got to write 3 pages. So I think a lot of people, and I've done this in the past, we just start writing. We just start putting ideas, we just start writing it out. We think, oh, this is gonna be great. And then inevitably, and I've seen this happen so many times, someone gets, maybe a few paragraphs or a few pages, and then they sort of hit a brick wall. They don't know where to go next. They're at a loss. And, we call it writer's block often. They're stuck. And I think one of the biggest reasons that so many people get stuck is because they haven't thought through the whole thing from beginning to middle and end. They don't have a roadmap. It's like getting in a car and driving and not knowing where you're going, and you're just sort of following the road, and you realize, I don't know where I'm going. You're literally lost. And I see this over and over again. I see it in the corporate world a lot where, they'll develop, 100 slides in their deck, and then I ask people, okay, what's the core message of this presentation, of this keynote? And no one can say. They spent so much time creating 100 slides. So basically the 50-25-25 rule is it's a guide, a framework for how to use your time. So and I think it works no matter whether you have a month to get ready, a few weeks, a week, even if just a few hours. And so what I say is just set aside the first 50% of your time to think, to research, to learn, to talk to people, to write down notes. You're not creating, you're not wordsmithing, you're not trying to come up with the perfect sentence at this point. That comes later, but just consume information and start a research document, pull together all your ideas. I'm called a speechwriter, but I've spent most of my time, half of my time often, just gathering ideas and research and nuggets that makes the writing so much easier when you actually sit down to do it. I spend maybe 25% of my time writing. Because you spend so much time gathering all that material, you have an embarrassment of riches. And that last 25% is a piece that I think a lot of people forget, especially in the corporate world, which is set aside time to practice. And by practice, we mean read it out loud. Speeches, keynotes, presentations, these are meant to be spoken. They're not meant to be read. So something you might write down on a piece of paper looks fine. But then when you practice it out loud, you immediately realize, wow, that's a really hard word to say, or that's a really long sentence. I can't possibly do that, or I'm stumbling over this idea. Only by practicing it out loud do you get to see how it's going to, better that you find that out during a rehearsal than at the podium when you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of the audience. So yeah, 50-25-25, it's just a framework. I mean, people can choose their own exact division of labor, but I think those are the 3 big sort of phases that if you get those right, you're more likely to have a presentation and a speech in the end that actually does what it needs to do.
You argue that writing exposes your thinking, and I absolutely agree with that. How can people use writing as a tool to basically clarify their position and what they want to say before they go and convince somebody else into what they want to say?
So I know there's like all sorts of debate out there in the public speaking communication world. I hear some people say, no, you should never read a speech. People don't want you to read a speech. They want you to be natural and authentic. And I always bothers me because I don't think there's, that reading it is not being authentic. Some of those powerful, most authentic speeches and presentations we've ever heard were written down because the person took the time to think it through. So I'm a huge advocate of writing it out and, not winging it. It's really easy just to sort of brainstorm and say, I'm going to say these sort of things. But there's something about the act of writing it down when you actually comes to the point where you have to put real words on real paper or screen, and you see that, wow, that idea that you were so, enthralled with, when you actually write it out, you realize, wow, it's not as compelling as I thought it was. Or one of the ideas that you didn't fully appreciate all of a sudden becomes your main argument. We have a saying that, if you haven't written it out, you haven't thought it out. And
Uh,
I'm a firm believer in that. And actually, I tell a story in the book too. Writing it out can help you make better decisions. Because again, once you see the strengths or weaknesses in your particular argument, you might choose to go a different way. So there was a moment during the war in Afghanistan where one of the leading generals had made some very disparaging remarks about the president and the vice president. Which when in with civilian control, the military is a real no-no. So the president had to decide what to do. Does he keep this general on, or does he let this general go? And I was kind of torn, to be honest with. I wasn't sure. Did these remarks rise to the level of insubordination? Did he need to go? I could have gone either way, but interestingly, the president had one of my colleagues write two speeches: one keeping the general, one letting the general go. And when I saw both of those speeches, at least for me, like, wow, now that I've seen both arguments, yeah, I think this guy has to go. I think the president deserves to have a general who's going to, not undermine him in the public domain. And
yeah.
I don't know what the president's. I wasn't part of that decision, but in the end, president did accept the resignation. I think probably having those two speeches helped him make a better decision. So again, until you write it out, you often haven't thought it through. So it can be really important for that reason as well.
No, absolutely. And if we go to from that level to the level of everyday person, and even when I have so many ideas in my head, and I say, oh, I know what to do. This is what I'm going to do. And then I want to write it and have a presentation so I can teach people. And then I realize, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then the panic sets in. And then I start writing. And then I write everything. And then I read it again. And then slowly the thing that I want to say crystallizes. But
Mhm.
that first draft is absolutely
Yeah,
not acceptable.
they
It's
would
just
say
unbelievable.
the first draft is often you explaining it to yourself, right? It's your initial thoughts, and they're called first drafts for a reason. They're not meant to
Yeah,
be the final draft. And so,
yeah,
yeah, it is
yeah,
a process. It is a and I think when you look at those photos online of the president Obama writing out his speeches, again, what you're seeing, what you're witnessing there is a leader thinking through their policy and the best way to communicate that policy to the public.